What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for joining us on another episode for Living in El Paso. And today I want to have a conversation with you guys about my opinions on the Nar settlement and the whole craziness that's going on right now. Long story short, there was a settlement that started. Now, there's so much information out there. I don't want to bore you with all the details. I just want to get to the facts, the opinions, and what you can do about it. But to get you caught up to speed, I will add some article information for you guys to just kind of know a little bit more about the settlement. Long story short, people were suing some brokerages because they believed that there was price fixing in commissions. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to go into a few points here. I want to make 3 main points, and I want to encourage you to ask any questions down below. But with that being said, I want to add a quick little note and disclaimer, which is you have always had the right to represent yourself. And this is not news. This is something that if you go on Google, if you go on any kind of website of any kind, you will find out that you, as either a buyer or a seller, are entitled 100% to represent yourself. Here's the caveat to that. More than likely, you don't want to because you don't know anything about the marketing, you don't know anything about the contracts, you don't know anything about the advertising, you don't know anything about the prices, you don't know anything about the concessions, inspections, all these things that we can ramble on and on and on about. But with that being said, you have the right to do it. Now, correct me if you're wrong. However, if, God forbid, you were in a legal situation and you were given the option to represent yourself and have an attorney represent you, chances are most of you would choose to have an attorney represent you. Now, between the state awarded one and you actually hiring, not sure if you're going to get this reference, but Harvey Specter, right? I'm pretty sure you would go with Harvey Specter. For those of you that don't get that inside joke, it's the whole show on Netflix. Now, the reason I say this to you is because there's different agents in the industry, just like there's different doctors in the industry, just like there's different dentists in the industry, teachers, everything. And it all comes down to the person, because just because one person has done you wrong, let's say, but whether that be a teacher when you were younger, whether that be an attorney, whether that be a doctor, that doesn't mean that they're all the same. Now, with that out of the way, I think you can agree that that would be the case as well with agents. We're not all the same. And I say this because it's honestly been very sad to see how even agents within themselves are tearing themselves to shreds. They're talking about how you should not get a buyer's agent and you should just work with the listing agent. And then other people are talking about without us, aka a buyer's agent, you wouldn't even have a listing sold. So I want to talk to you about 3 key components here. Again, we just discussed why the lawsuit started. That was the first one. And again, I will reference some articles down below just to help you do your own research. I don't want to share with you one side of the equation. I want you to come up with your own unbiased perspective. Number 2, what is the difference between hiring an actual listing agent and a buyer's agent? Now, the simplest way I can explain it is piggybacking off of the comment that I just said, which is, that there's good doctors, that there's bad doctors, that there's good teachers, that there's bad teachers. The reason I say this is because hiring a buyer's agent, as you being a buyer, protects you and your best interest. There's this little rule, okay, when you are a licensed advisor in real estate that basically states that you need to have a fiduciary duty to your client, whether that be the buyer or whether that be the seller. So bear with me in this example. Let's say you want to buy a house and I'm the listing agent for the house that you like. My seller is my client. I have an exclusive agreement with my seller, okay? You say, Alexa, I want your house. I am interested in it and I want to buy it. And I say, fantastic. Let's go ahead and look at it. Let's write up an offer. Now you tell me in that appointment, Alexa, I really need your seller to help me with closing costs. Now I know you're not represented at this point, right? You're following my little example. So what I'm going to say is, okay, let's write it up. Let me talk to my client and see what we might be able to do. Now, if you know anything about negotiations, you know that a negotiation is usually going to be a meeting of the minds. However, there's some negotiations that don't go that way. It can go far left or far right. Now, the reason that's important to notate is because when I talk to my seller and I explain to them, this person has no representation, they're interested in your house, they love it, they told me that their grandparents lived on the street and they need this house, their kids need to go to the school district, X, Y, and Z, the whole shebang. Now my seller knows how motivated you are because you as the buyer just gave me all your cards. I've never played poker, but I have family friends that have, and it's basically like you just showed all your cards, okay? The reason that's important to notate is because now, as I have a fiduciary duty to my client, my seller, not you, my buyer, you're not my buyer, you're just somebody that's interested in the house, I'm gonna tell him, let's tell this client that we are willing to sell it to them, but we're not gonna help them with closing costs. Now, this is the part that most people are not understanding in this lawsuit because there's really nothing that has changed. The main thing that has changed is being very upfront, which should have been something that you were doing from the beginning, but being extremely upfront with your clients. And if you're an agent watching this, please make sure you're doing this moving forward. And if you're a buyer or an actual seller, make sure your agent is doing this for you, but that they're being upfront with you about who is paying your fee, right? So if you're the listing agent, the buyer's agent, whatever the case is, or if you're a seller or a buyer, how are you paying this fee? The problem came from people saying that there was like price fixing in the industry. The reality is that in real estate, your commission that you pay has always been negotiable, just like a seller concession. If you don't know what a seller concession is, it's basically closing costs. When you're buying a house, you have to pay your closing costs. However, depending on the market, you usually ask the seller to pay for your closing cost. It's the same thing when it comes to your buyer commission or your listing agreement commission. Now, the reason this is so important to notate is because the reason that this lawsuit kind of got this little, snowball effect going on was because people then started jumping on the bandwagon from different states, now suing the National Association of Realtors. Again, this is my opinion based off the facts that I have researched based off the information that we have gathered, but do your own research and I will click the link. I will put the links below. But essentially people started jumping on the bandwagon because again, who doesn't want free money, right? Who doesn't want to get in and doesn't matter whose lives you're wrecking, let's just get money. That's essentially what happened because attorneys that got wind of the fact that there was a lawsuit going, just kind of like when there are situations that happen in the world that now you're like, oh, this legal lawsuit is going on and other attorneys start to get involved, is the same thing that happened with the Association of Realtors. And what ended up happening at that point is that now to protect and be even more clear, and by the way, here in Texas, we already do that. We already have a listing agreement where we are very specific about what as the buyer's agent they're getting paid and what as the seller's agent you're getting paid. But now they're enforcing that. It hasn't been officially enforced yet, but they're saying around June, July, that should be enforced. We've been enforcing that already. But essentially now what's gonna happen is that you need to be very upfront with your client, which you should have been doing from the beginning, and let them know, hey, you are paying for us to market your property. You are paying for us to bring you a buyer. Now, I want to share with you something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, which is going to lead to my third point. What is the difference between a flat rate broker and an actual brokerage? Now, for those of you that don't know what a flat rate broker is, it's basically when you go into this service company that they hold a license, and what they'll typically do is that they'll charge you a flat fee. And they'll say, hey, Mr. Seller, you want to sell your house? Okay, cool. We're going to allow for our brokerage to put your listing on Zillow and on the MLS. And basically what you're doing at that point is that you're just paying them a flat fee. Sometimes it's $500, sometimes it's $1,000. It varies, okay? Here's the thing with flat fee, okay? They're not doing any marketing. They're not doing any negotiations for you. They do not put their phone number on the information. They have you be the one to take the calls. They have you be the one to negotiate. And if you put yourself in a situation like we just explained with that example of the buyer and you say all the information to the buyer's agent, you just cost yourself money because now they know you're going through a divorce and you need to sell that house. And now you just lost all your leverage. The thing with that is that a lot of people believe, and there was a lot of agents that were shredding themselves to pieces saying, bye-bye buyer's agents, now we will no longer need you. It just goes to show how sometimes it's important to show grace. Regardless of what your opinion is of this video, if you watched this far, just remember to be kind to others. You never know when the script is gonna flip on you. And honestly, being kind goes a further way than being ugly, because the law of attraction will come back, and whether that's positive or negative, it comes back to you. But what was basically happening is that people were starting to say, we don't need a buyer's agent. We should just go with a listing agent, and that's it. The thing and the problem with that is that we go back to the concept that I explained to you earlier. That person is negotiating on the best interest of their client. Now, if we want to get into a dual agency, that's a completely other can of worms. But for the most part, you want your own representation, buyer or seller. So what's happening right now is that the buyer's agents have always been the ones to bring a buyer to your listing. Let's say now you're a seller, okay? And if you tell that same buyer's agent, hey, my seller is not willing to pay any commission, they're paying my percentage, whatever that was negotiated, the standard has always been considered to be 6%, but there's no standard. There's no set price because everything is negotiable in real estate. I've seen some people charge 7%. I've seen some $1 million homes charge 2%. It varies, okay? It all depends on, again, let's use the example of an attorney, how good the person that you're hiring is, okay? So to finish this, when it comes to that flat rate situation, if you are not offering any commission to that buyer's agent to bring their buyer, what's gonna happen is they're gonna go back and they're gonna talk to their client and they're gonna tell their client, hey, so remember that fee we talked about, that my fee is 3% as an example. This is my fee. That's typically what we will charge in our company for our buyers and our listings, the 3%. So let's just say that's the 3% that we're doing. I talk to you and I say, hey, you know what? Remember that 3% that we talked about that allows me to not only give you the best representation, negotiate on your behalf, take time to take care of you, make sure that we're doing X, Y, and Z, and still feed my family. I say that because a lot of people think like, oh, you're working, you just want to make money. Last I checked, nobody works for Unicorn. So with that being said, let's say I have that conversation and I say, hey, you know what? So that property that you like, the seller is not willing to pay your commission. I'm sorry, my commission. Therefore, that 3% that we talked about, you're going to need to cover, plus your closing costs, because they weren't willing to help that with that either. More than likely, if you're a buyer, you're going to tell me, Alexa, find me a deal that you can know for a fact they're going to still help me with my closing costs and that buyer fee. And now as the seller, back to that example, you're costing yourself money. You're staying on the market longer because of the fact that you went with a flat rate broker. They're already not doing any marketing for you. But number two, you're not offering any incentive for anybody to want to buy it. Then we go back to the last point, which is you were always able to sell your house on your own. You never needed an expert, but you chose to get an expert. There's a lot of people that can sell cars directly, but they don't want to sell their cars directly because they don't know what to do and they don't want to have any problems. I know I've never sold my car directly. I go to the dealership and I tell them, hey, how much are you going to give me for the car? Because I don't want to deal with it. So keep this in mind because there's a lot of information going on. There's a lot of different opinions going on. And if you can just know the facts, this is not about telling you what to do. This is about educating you, because I know when I bought my first house, my realtor, she did not explain anything to me. She made me feel very dumb. That's really what it was. I would ask a question and she made me feel like, why are you even asking this question? Like, you should already know. So for me, I have a deep vested interest in this, which is just educating people, because at the end of the day, you're going to work with people that you know, that you like, and that you trust. And sometimes we don't know people, but we get to know them. And little by little, you start to like them, you trust them. And I think that's what you should be looking for, whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller. In this whole settlement, there's going to be good agents and there's going to be bad agents. Make sure you're going for the people that have your best interests. Make sure you have the people that are on your side, that are going to negotiate for you and are not just what the stereotypical umbrella falls under, which is agents just get paid to put a house on the market. That is, my friend, a door opener. That's what we call them, at least the agents that really don't work for the deal. And I've seen that happen. I've seen where I bring a buyer, the listing has been sitting for months and months and months. I finally bring a buyer to them and then they're advertising it on social media how we helped our seller sell this house. No, you didn't do any marketing. We brought you a buyer. And that's okay. But just know the facts. Know everything that goes into a transaction so that nobody is selling you on their idea of what's right and what's wrong, but you know what is going to work for you and your family. So with that being said, I hope this video was helpful. I encourage you to ask any questions because that's the only way we're going to get a lot of this put to bed. And I do believe that most people right now don't understand what's going on in the market. And that's the reason why there's so much animosity going on. There's so many different perspectives going on. And at the end of the day, what's really going to affect the end all be all is the consumer. Because just like this legal action just happened now because of the whole price fixing situation lawsuit, I'm afraid that at one point, now a buyer is going to start suing the listing agent because you didn't represent my best interest. You represented your client. You told me you were going to represent me, but you didn't. Make sure you're doing your research. That's all I can encourage you. I will drop down below, like I said, some useful tools for you guys to just like navigate through the home buying process, what to consider. We have a book for both buyers and sellers that we've published to help our people understand what goes into each side of the transaction. This way, whether you're working with somebody in our agency or somebody else, you at least know what to look for. I hope you have a fantastic and blessed day, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.